1 minute ago, the California coast crossed a line no one wanted to see crossed, as record-breaking king tides slammed head-on into a rising storm surge, and the boundary between land and ocean simply gave way. Roads in Half Moon Bay are no longer roads, but channels of churning saltwater. Harbors are inundated. Tide gauges are climbing past anything recorded this year, needles pinned where there should still be room to rise. Emergency warnings have escalated within minutes, yet officials are careful with their words, because this still may not be the worst of it. What happens next is uncertain, and that uncertainty is what makes this event more dangerous than anyone anticipated. Coastal flood warnings now stretch in an unbroken chain from Mendocino to Monterey. Upgraded just after dawn when fresh data from the Point Arena buoy jumped to nearly 25 feet, with wave periods exceeding 18 seconds. Numbers that carry far more energy than their height alone suggests. The National Weather Service moved quickly. Forecasters flagged abnormal surges on the San Francisco Presidio tide gauge, readings that did not match any recent pattern. By 5:45 a.m., alert levels were raised to their highest tier, marking the first time in 2 years the Bay Area has seen a warning of this magnitude. What had been projections and models only hours earlier are now confirmed realities. Flooded streets in Half Moon Bay are no longer a forecast, they are unfolding in real time. By 10:00 a.m., Highway 1 vanished beneath moving water, vehicles stranded, emergency crews forced to reroute traffic with no certainty about when the road will re-emerge. In Pacifica, waves have already crashed over the seawall, scattering debris and leaving behind reports of minor cracking that engineers fear may deepen under sustained pressure. Farther north, Crescent City harbor jetties were breached before sunrise. Boats were tossed by 25-foot waves, some pinned hard against docks, lines snapping under strain. The tide gauge at San Francisco Presidio is reading over 9 feet, with predictions pushing beyond 11, while officials track a surge 2 to 4 feet above the usual high tide. Low-lying neighborhoods are now under evacuation advisories, and flood watches extend inland, following creeks and drainage channels swollen by rain. Gale warnings keep mariners out of coastal waters, but the risk zone has expanded to cover more than 200 miles of shoreline, placing harbors, piers, and waterfront businesses under immediate threat. Every alert being issued is grounded in live data. Buoys, tide gauges, and eyewitness reports are streaming in faster than they can be verified. The situation is evolving hour by hour, and no one in authority is calling it contained. The official message is blunt. Conditions remain unstable, and the window for meaningful action is narrowing. Emergency operations centers along the coast are now fully staffed, teams rotating through 12-hour shifts as new data pours in. Harbor masters from Crescent City to Monterey have issued advisories restricting vessel movement, and at least 3 small ports have begun preparations to close their entrances entirely if water levels climb any higher. In low-lying neighborhoods, city crews work through the night to stock sandbag stations and stage barricades near flood-prone intersections. On the water, the network of ocean buoys and tide gauges is under continuous watch. The Point Arena buoy that recorded the first major spike is transmitting wave height and period every minute to regional command centers. The San Francisco Presidio gauge, hovering above 9 feet, is being scrutinized for any sign of further surge. Technicians from the Coastal Data Information Program have been called in to monitor for signal loss, because a single outage could blindside responders during the most critical hours. Local agencies are relying on live traffic cameras and social media posts to confirm street-level flooding as it unfolds. In just the past hour, more than 100 new reports have come in, prompting dispatchers to reroute patrols and update evacuation routes in real time. Each new tide cycle brings a fresh round of uncertainty, and the sensor network has become the only early warning against what might come next. Vigilance is the focus now. Every alert, every reading, every eyewitness account is another fragment of a puzzle that refuses to settle into a clear picture. There is precedent for this kind of violence. In January of 1983, Crescent City's harbor was battered by waves so powerful that entire sections of the pier snapped away in the darkness. Survivors from that night still describe the sound as a freight train rolling underwater, shaking every boat at its mooring. Luis Marquez, a fisherman with 3 decades of winters behind him, remembers watching lines snap and boats lurch as water surged higher than the dock lights. Back then, the storm pushed in from the same direction, 220 degrees, straight out of the deep Pacific. But today, the ocean is carrying even more energy, and the difference this time is the atmosphere itself. A powerful atmospheric river is driving not just rain, but a conveyor belt of moisture directly into the coast. The National Weather Service and the NOAA Coastal Data Program are tracking wave heights and periods that rival, and in some ways exceed, the 1983 event. The Point Arena buoy's nearly 25-foot significant wave height, paired with long periods over 18 seconds, translates into force that overwhelms typical winter defenses. In 1983, king tide and swell arrived together, but lacked today's atmospheric punch. Now, added moisture is stacking water on top of already elevated tides, creating a compound threat the old playbook never had to address. Even seasoned mariners like Marquez are weighing their options minute by minute, watching for signs that the harbor itself could become unmanageable. The precedent exists, but the ingredients have changed, and the coast is confronting a storm governed by new rules. High tide is set to peak between 11 and 1, and the next surge window aligns almost exactly with the strongest incoming wave energy. That timing leaves a margin of barely 90 minutes during which floodwaters could climb even higher than this morning's record readings. Forecast models indicate a secondary low-pressure system forming roughly 500 miles offshore, feeding new swell energy toward the coast. Meteorologists warn this reinforcement could extend dangerous conditions through Friday, keeping harbors and neighborhoods exposed longer than initially expected. Along the shoreline, infrastructure is already showing strain. In Pacifica, the seawall extension faces mounting pressure. Engineers have documented hairline cracks since last winter, and recent audits flagged fatigue under prolonged long-period swells. Repairs have been delayed for months, trapped in funding shortfalls that have left dozens of coastal assets underprotected as storm season peaks. City officials acknowledge a backlog of maintenance now estimated at more than $1 billion statewide, a gap that means some defenses are operating on borrowed time. The real-time sensor network has become critical. Overnight, the Point Arena buoy abruptly dropped offline after recording its highest spike. Technician Marcus Simmons led a remote reboot in 40-knot winds, restoring the feed just as the next wave set arrived. He later described the moment as a heart-stopper, knowing a data blackout could leave emergency teams blind during the most volatile hours. With each new tide cycle, the margin for error shrinks, and every reading now carries more weight than the last. Planners see 3 possible outcomes. If swell energy fades and the high tide passes without further reinforcement, water levels could begin to recede by late afternoon, shifting the focus to clearing debris and reopening roads with relatively limited damage. If the offshore system continues to feed new waves, the risk could linger for days, keeping harbor operations suspended and evacuation advisories in place. The scenario that worries officials most is a direct overlap, peak tide aligning with the next surge, a convergence that could breach additional seawalls, push floodwaters farther inland, and force rapid closures of ports and critical infrastructure. All eyes remain fixed on the live data, waiting for the next signal that will tip the balance. A warmer Pacific is shaping this season's extremes, increasing both the frequency and intensity of king tide events along the California coast. This is not a one-off crisis. It is part of a pattern expected to repeat and intensify in the months ahead. With each new storm, stress on coastal defenses grows. State audits confirm more than $1 billion in deferred repairs, with some of the most critical seawalls and jetties operating on less than two-thirds of the funding experts say is necessary. These gaps leave entire communities exposed when the next surge arrives. As winter progresses, officials warn that the combination of warm ocean conditions and underfunded infrastructure could turn seasonal flooding into something far more destructive. Right now, coastal flood alerts stretch from San Diego to Crescent City, impacting more than 8 million Californians. As sea levels rise and storms intensify, record surges like this are shifting from rare emergencies to an emerging norm. The coastline's future is being rewritten in real time, one tide, one warning, one irreversible moment at a time.